Welcome back to Daybreak. Thank you so much for staying with us. Well, here's a reminder of our top stories. U.S. President Donald Trump says TV networks against him should maybe lose their license after the Jimmy Kimmel suspension. His comments come as the head of the U.S. broadcast regulator vows to keep holding networks accountable.
Trump meets UK PM Starmer, strikes a softer tone, but urges Europe to cut reliance on Russian oil.
Where is Governor Fubara? Expectant supporters leave Rivers State Government House disappointed after waiting for hours.
And in spite of prompts from President Tinubu, the National Economic Council again sidesteps the issue of state police. All right, now it's time for a review of what's making the headlines this morning. Oh, Yolanda, you and I are in one accord this morning.
Yes, we're in one mind with the
very
pink
excited
today.
to get into the papers.
Absolutely.
With the pink, right? Even Benga is giving us a shade of
He
that
is.
color. I love it. This is a proper TGIF.
The spirit is one, and everyone is expecting to know the whereabouts of the governor of Rivers State. Well, we hope all is well.
Absolutely. But Benga, we're going to begin with governors whose locations we do know. We know the whereabouts of Governor Peter Mbah, who's on the front page of today's
Very
This
nice,
Day newspaper. And the headlines, of course, the headlines are all about the great work that he intends to do for the state. So the headline there is Governor Mbah, Enugu will use coal to generate 1,000 megawatts of electricity. Ambitious plan, but I think this is what's become trademark of Governor Peter Mbah, who is sharing the fact that, you know, it's time for Enugu to start using the heavy coal reserves that the state has, that the coal can no longer continue as a stranded asset. And of course, he rolled out several other plans that he has. Now, he spoke at the Meet the Governors series, which was held by the Nigerian British Chamber of Commerce, where he presented a business case for investing in Enugu State. So beyond talking about coal and its potential to generate electricity, he also included updates about the fact that they've been able to reduce the crime rate in Enugu State by 80%. I mean, that's massive. They've completed the International Conference Center, which we know hosted the just concluded Nigerian Bar Association conference. And he also spoke about the fact that they're expecting delivery of more aircrafts towards the end of this year for Enugu Air. So I love to see positive developments. We often say that there's not enough attention given to the subnationals. We often don't hold governors accountable enough for the work that they do, because there's a tendency to focus on the federal, on the president and whatever is happening there. But Governor Peter Mbah, especially, we know that electricity is a sore point, whether it be in the private sector or for, you know, average citizens like you and I at home. And earlier in the year, Enugu State had made an attempt to reduce the electricity price, if you remember. But they ended up getting embroiled in a squabble with the disco. Benga, I'll begin with you this morning. Great news coming from Enugu State and very ambitious plans as well.
Well, it shows that with the right laws and enabling environment, many of our governors, a lot of things would work well. I recall that just about 2 weeks ago, the governor unveiled the revamping plan for a gas plan, and now we can see him coming up with these audacious reforms in the electricity sector. The governor of the coal city, I think, is determined to maximize what the state has to set the path for self-sufficiency, and this is very rewarding. I remember that immediately the Electricity Act 2024 was flagged off. Enugu State was one of those who spearheaded that audacious move to generate its own power. And now 1,000 megawatts of electricity is about 1/5 of the entire nation. So I even see Enugu State having a great export potential of its electricity to some of the African neighbors if the necessary implementation strategy is in place. So this is a welcome development, and kudos to Governor Peter Mbah of Enugu State.
I just have one comment I'd like to throw in, if you don't mind, Vimbai. We shouldn't forget as well that coal is a non-renewable resource, meaning that it's not something that will be around forever. So in implementing this plan and, you know, playing around with this idea of using coal as an alternative for electricity, as an electricity source, excuse me, I think we should also bear in mind that there needs to be strategy and plan for the future. What happens when this coal runs out? What then is, what measures are in place as an alternative when this non-renewable resource actually runs out?
I think the Niger gas is a clear alternative in its roadmap to electricity and energy security for the Enugu State future and Africa's future too. That is one of those long-term implementation strategy that will go a long way. I also talked about Enugu's export potential in the coming days if all the necessary implementation strategy is in place. I think Enugu is set to lead the pack when it comes to reforms in Africa.
Absolutely. I think fantastic points from both of you. I like where Yolanda is going with this, so we don't end up falling into the same trap that we found ourselves with oil, where we become resource dependent on one super resource that's feeding us. However, in the meantime, I think it's commendable that we embark on this journey where we make use of the resources that we have beneath the ground, especially if it's about electricity generation. You know, right now, that's a welcome development for us all because we're feeling the brunt. And I also thought it was important to highlight that given the nature of the reports of insecurity around the country, for a state to come and say that they've reduced crime by 80% is something that's very laudable. And I think the governor should be highly commended for that because remember earlier we took a story about how NEC did not address issues around state police and the governors in some states feeling very helpless with regards to being able to confront security issues within their states. So it would be interesting to know what Governor Mbah has done differently that other governors can try and also take advantage of while we await to see whether state police will become a reality. But let's shift our attention to Osun State. Benga, I know you're the pro when it comes to Osun State. Osun PDP has asked the Federal High Court Chief Justice to probe suspicious letters in the local government funds case. This is still on the front page of this day newspaper. So there's said to be a letter that originated from the office of the chief judge directing that a case before a vacation judge be heard by that judge substantively. The allegation is that this letter was not signed by the judge himself, but by a personal aide. Discrepancies around when the letter was dispatched and when it was signed, and just a mess continues with the Osun State and the local government funds. Wenga, do you think we're going to see the end of this anytime soon?
Well, I think it clearly borders on abuse of judicial process, if you ask me. And but in looking at this matter, it calls for a thorough investigation. We really need to exercise caution because now, in these days where we could use AI to generate a lot of falsehood, we need to exercise care and caution. And also, the accused party could easily get away by claiming a back date on this allegation. But be that as it may, this clearly violates the Federal High Court Act that states that if you want a change in the presiding judge of a case, it should be an open court matter. And the other party, the letter that was leaked, was calling for an immediate introduction, transfer to a judge that was on vacation. And they're also arguing that it would amount to nugatory if the case is not heard within that time frame of when the judge was on vacation. This clearly violates the Federal High Court Act that states that it should be an open matter. The application should be sent formally during the court process. So, but when we look at all this matter, I will still call for caution and thorough investigation into this matter. And also, you know, the Attorney General has also been fingered for the disregard of the Federal High Court case in November 30, 2022, and also the Court of Appeal case in 2025. But there was another Court of Appeal case that favored the APC. So when we look at all these things, I think the underlying factor that is resonating now is the need for a judicial reform, a call for speedy dispensation of justice, so that we would not be having the issue of subsidies and all those kind of bottlenecks in the nation's judicial process, and also the nation's judicial integrity should not be questioned.
Absolutely. Yeah. Wenge, it looks like the anomalies are endless, especially where it concerns Osun State.
Absolutely.
Well, let's take our final story on this day, which focuses again on that Afriland Towers fire that we've been following so closely. And I really want to applaud the media, because the media has really stayed on the story. This day takes tributes pour in for victims of Afriland fire. President Tinubu, Atiku, Sanwo-Olu, Obi mourn. On that will also go to the front page of the Daily Trust. The Daily Trust is reporting that a Lagos building fire, survivors, experts blame slow response. Now, earlier in our bulletin, we had taken a story where Lagos State has responded and said that there was no slow response, that the firefighters were there on the ground on time. But there was something curious that emerged from that report, which is that they were saying that, well, the people who were affected, and especially those who died, didn't die from the fire. It was from smoke inhalation. But firefighters are there to safeguard life, whether it be from fire or from smoke inhalation. The property owners, property managers, of Afriland Towers are also saying that all things required for fire prevention and, for fire response were available in that building, that there were fire alarms that went off, and so forth and so forth. So we almost have two conflicting narratives here, especially given the fact that we've seen the videos that went viral. Yolanda, what do you make of this? Where do we pull out the truth from sort of the varying narratives coming out of this case?
Mbah, in my opinion, I think it's in bad taste at this point, when people have lost lives, to now come out and say that, oh, well, we were on ground, but they didn't die because we didn't act fast enough. It's not the time to put out that type of a statement. It's a bit insensitive to what has just happened, because just as you've rightfully said, social media, the news, there's so much footage. You can see that there are no, fire service trucks on ground. The people who are there with the ladders are regular civilians like you and I. So we're not seeing this action that they are claiming to have, taken in really good time. And it's really unfortunate. And as well, I think there's a part of this incident that is not looked at. This is a major building in Lagos, but as well, I think in recent times, markets have also been facing quite a few fires. We have had many reports where they said that the fire department is not acting fast enough when it's responding to fires, across various states. So something really needs to be done in this area. And hopefully all of the, the top politicians who have poured in their, their tributes for these loss of lives will also use this opportunity to, kind of influence what happens, because we can't still be talking about these fire incidents on this scale. We need to move on to solutions for this. We can't just be leaving everything to fate and say, oh, there were no smoke detectors that were functioning in the building. It's in bad taste. We shouldn't be at this point, especially with the type of population that cities such as Lagos has. You have so many people. You can't afford to be negligent when it comes to issues of emergency and safety.
Very well said. The National Orientation Agency has been doing a lot of work to try and change the narrative around that that phrase that people often say, which is that Nigeria happened to you, to spin it into something positive. But I think what we need to do is we need to see the changes on the ground of Nigeria happening to you becoming a positive experience, because until, for as long as we see incidents like this continue to happen, Nigeria happening to you will still be something that's reflected as, a negative event happening to you. But let's move forward to the Guardian newspaper. Of course, we love the Guardian and their detailed exposés on various issues. Today, it's all about health, and I think this is important a conversation to maintain at the front burner, especially because we know that the issues around potential strikes from doctors have not yet been fully resolved. So Guardian says brain drain, exhausted doctors, long wait times test public hospitals' care capacity. So this report talks about how the doctors themselves have, in essence, become patients or victims because some of them are working 24-hour shifts. Patients are waiting for hours and hours on end to be able to get attention in the public hospitals, and just the general state high staff turnover rate, of course, because the doctors are exhausted and are looking for greener pastures. It just seems like there's no respite for the fragile state of our healthcare system. Yolanda, I'll come back to you because I like how you put a human face on some of these stories. Your take on this, it feels like we've seen this headline so many times, yet no change.
At the beginning of this week, Mbah, I don't know if you remember, but we awakened a report that said that doctors are back on strike again. And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but this headline that you've just taken is looking a lot like what is happening with the NHS in the UK as well. So it seems like, there are a lot of issues in the face of, public hospitals and the challenges that are being faced. But now the exhaustion of doctors, I think, is now taking it to another level, because now who will treat those doctors? We also spoke, I think, a few weeks ago how people were losing their lives, especially those in intensive care units, people who need everyday, monitoring by a doctor is now being done by, lower level staff who are not in the area of, being able to prescribe medication and all of that. So it's really sad to see what is going on. And the workforce in Nigeria, especially in the medical arena, is really, really taking a blow. And one can only imagine what does the future hold for Nigeria when it comes to this issue. If all of our doctors are leaving, all of our doctors are, giving up and striking, what is the government doing? We need to come to a resolution, because there are some areas such as this that cannot afford to be neglected for long periods of time.
Okay, if I may add to this, I think at the outset of the Bola Ahmed Tinubu's administration, it came up with a very ambitious renewed hope agenda in which the health sector was the cornerstone, and he made good that plan by appointing Mohammed Ali Pate as the coordinating Minister of Health and Social Welfare. We've seen quite a couple of investments in the health sector, but the situation now leaves a lot to be desired, because when you look at the situation, the mass exodus of doctors, medical practitioners outside, it kind of questions, it kind of dampened investors' confidence. You recall that recently, about 3 weeks ago, the Minister of Health came up with a health investment plan calling on, he said he needed two major things, and that's the need to power the sector and the need for connectivity. So what has been done to that? We saw the Minister of FCT yesterday saying that for the first time in his tenure as the Minister of FCT, he had traveled and just to have a break. And it was during that period that the resident doctors and the FCT decided to go on strike. But the fact is that, what are the grounds? They have not been paid their salary. So he called the head of service. But when you look at the other side, the fact that one major sticking point, a fly in the ointment, was that he made a revelation that they got the approval for the sector at just July this year. So it shows a cacophony, a very discordant management of Nigeria's health sector, and that reveals so much institutional and systemic failure. And I think that this needs to be addressed. Otherwise, the health of the nation and also the economy of the nation, because a healthy nation is a wealthy one. So we need to come together and address the roadmap to the nation's health and social welfare security in this country.
Very well said, Benga. Very, very well said. Because again, you know, it's a conflicting story. We are seeing developments in one side, but are they really reaching the masses? Are they really? Is this respite really getting to the numbers, the mass numbers of people?
No, they're not.
Now, to politics, or to the story that, of course, is probably the juiciest story that we all want to bite into this morning. You know, we started our day yesterday in Rivers State as we anticipated the return of Governor Siminalayi Fubara, his deputy Ngozi Odu, and the State House of Assembly members. Let's go to the front page of Punch newspaper that reports on that emergency rule. Uncertainty in Rivers as Fubara delays return. You know, we sort of started the day in Port Harcourt yesterday with a high anticipation of how things could play out and cautious optimism as to what reception, you know, all of those returning would receive. Of course, later in the day, we were given the update. You know, I really do have to commend Andy Omano and Friday Oloko, who have been on the ground consistently for us, you know, throughout the saga. You know, we found that the State House Assembly resumed at around 10 a.m., 11 a.m., and they passed a number of resolutions, namely that they would vet and they would review, or rather probe, the spending that has been taking place in the last 6 months. But, you know, even amongst the crowd and the jubilation of dancers and well-wishers that were awaiting the triumphant return of Governor Siminalayi Fubara, he was nowhere to be found. Later in the evening, I believe Minister of FCT Nyisa Muwike spoke on another platform where he said, well, he had spoken to Governor Fubara and there is peace, and that he was to depart wherever he was at some point during the day yesterday, you know, wherever that location is. Until date, we are yet to see or hear from the governor, although I hear it's a rainy morning in Port Harcourt. Our correspondents are on the ground at the airport because some word has reached us that it's possible that the governor will arrive at some stage this morning. But all of this unfolding, Benga, is this defiance or is it fear? Where is Governor Siminalayi Fubara?
You know, we raised some pertinent questions yesterday when we asked Andy Omano that have there been any meetings so far that showcase, that symbolizes that handshake, that transition from the incoming and the outgoing administrations? And he said that they have not seen the minister. It's not as if we got to know that they've not seen the minister as a kind of announcement from the grapevine, from the news mill. It was during our interview segment that we asked if there's been that transition meeting, that comparing of notes between the incoming government and the outgoing administration of Rear Admiral Ibas. So that was when we realized that. So I am personally not disappointed, even though majority of the people of Rivers were disappointed yesterday. But we're talking about looking at the process and the kind of Hobson's peace agreement that was served the governor. I think that it must have been, it would take a superhuman not to have been subdued. So the likelihood that he must have been subdued or must have lost interest. I was discussing with Yolanda earlier today, and she said that that would expose him as a politically weak person. But be that as it may, we are all human beings. The process was just too humiliating for a governor, and we saw the body language of those at the State House of Assembly when they were reading out what looks more like a riot act for them to act on, and they were calling him to submit the the list of the commissioner nominees and the budget for them to act on, and it looks more like a directive. The beauty of the separation of powers in the democratic setting was being questioned yesterday. The whole optics that was played out pre the transition period and the emergency 6-month period clearly shows a huge likelihood of a governor that must probably have been subdued.
Yolanda, your thoughts on this?
You know, I was just smiling when I was listening to Benga because I was like, wow, this is a very dicey situation. There's so much to look at, and unfortunately, a lot of it for the meantime would just be speculation, which we won't do, you know, but there are a lot of questions that would come out, you know, what is the meaning of this? As Benga rightfully mentioned, you know, earlier before the show began, we were sitting and trying to have a discussion about what is going on, what the possible reasons could be for why the governor has gone AWOL. And part of what came up, as was rightfully mentioned earlier, is that you can't tell whether this is a strategy, is it a sign of strength, or is this, you know, is this him hanging his head, you know, and trying to see what his next steps could be in a more cautious way? We don't know. And, you know, kudos as well, just as you mentioned as well, Mbah, that, you know, the reporters, especially the Arise correspondents, have been on the ground from yesterday, trying to get to the root of this, trying to see, you know, how we can get an angle and an update of what's going on in Rivers State. But unfortunately, it seems like it's still going to be a waiting game before we have any concrete answers to all of these vital questions.
Absolutely.
And if I may quickly add,
in the meantime, maybe we should have to remind
another question
ourselves.
we should be asking.
Go ahead, Benga. Yeah.
Sorry for coming in. Another question we should be asking is, where is the deputy governor? Let's assume that the governor was caught up in transit. We've not heard anything about Ngozi Udo, the deputy governor of Rivers State.
That's a good point.
So everything looks like an arranged absentee strategy to also pass a message across to the perpetrators of the emergency rule or the collaborators in this emergency rule.
Well, let's wait and see. For now, the information that we have is that it's possible that he might show up today. But let's see, you know, whether we're able to lay our eyes on him today. I know that the people of Rivers State will be anticipating his arrival because they need a return to normalcy sooner rather than later. But also, we might need to remind ourselves of that time, if you remember a few months ago when he said that, oh, the governorship, the seat of the governor has left his mind. He's not interested anymore.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So maybe he's just reminding us
very
that
vital point.
he's not interested. So let's round up now. So just very quickly, New Telegraph did also focus on Rivers State, you know, talking about the Rivers Assembly to probe Ibas's spendings as sole administrator. Our international papers, before we go, goodness me, what a show of force we saw yesterday between Donald Trump and Keir Starmer. The Guardian UK says Donald Trump has given some advice to Keir Starmer. I'm not sure how we feel about that. It says use the military to stop channel crossings, Trump tells Starmer. The Times UK, similar theme, says immigration is destroying UK. This is what Donald Trump had to say to Keir Starmer. Goodness me, how do people feel about Keir Starmer heeding to this advice? Yolanda?
You know, what is playing out here is almost like a replication of some of the things that are happening in America. I can't help but notice, this was the first standout thing that I noticed, especially when it comes to anti-immigration. You know, Donald Trump encouraging that, you know, Keir Starmer takes more, you know, aggressive action towards, you know, migration. It's really a scary thing to see, because this is what we have been seeing going on in the US as well, you know, where we have the National Guard called on people unnecessarily. And so now encouraging the UK to take the same steps is very scary to witness. You know, Tommy Robinson is the leader of this anti-immigration movement that has been going on in the UK. And one of his biggest supporters is actually been Elon Musk. Elon Musk has been retweeting everything that has been said by him and saying, yes, you should do what's best for your country. If it means you need to do it more aggressively, then go ahead and do that. So now to see Trump also coming up and saying this, it's quite jarring, especially when we know that the Brits have a more diplomatic way, a more subtle way of coming to conclusions. But seeing Trump actually encourage this level of militarization, so to speak, is it should yield some very interesting results.
Well, it's been a tale of two superpowers in the international arena. Well, you're watching Daybreak.